right, welcome back to Patient Win Insider. I'm Nick Moen, and today I'm joined by Matthew Hernandez, Director of Operations at Mukilteo Dental Center in Washington. Matthew comes from three generations of dental entrepreneurs and brings a unique perspective, combining clinical leadership, operational excellence, and coaching experience to help build practices sustainably. Today, we'll dive into what it takes to manage one of the largest single location dental practices in the region, the lessons that he's learned building DSOs, and how he's helping doctors avoid burnout while growing profitably. So let's get into it. Thanks for coming on, Matthew.
Yeah, Nick, appreciate it. Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
Well, I want to get into a little bit about your background and inspiration. You mentioned that you grew up in a dental family. Your dad and grandfather both built dental groups. So how did that shape your understanding of what it takes to build a thriving practice?
Well, when you're born into something, that's you kind of get thrown into the deep end of the pool. So
Yeah.
that's how it was for me. I'm from West Texas, a town called San Angelo, and yeah, my path started when my grandfather had a single location practice in Texas, and my dad was his lab technician, and helping him out doing odds and ends around the practice, and me growing up as a youngster playing with denture teeth and air water syringe fights with my brother, and so yeah, that's just my DNA. Yeah, and then growing up, seeing my dad span out and have this grand vision of creating a group. Back in the day, his vision of a group was the DMSO, so Dental Management Service Organization. Since then that acronym's changed so many times, but yeah, he had his group, and yeah, he just grew, started to scale, got out of Texas and got some place in Georgia, and worked in a lot of practices in Washington State, started to grow, and I really got to see what it took to make something happen. Be very resourceful and have a boatload of strength, and vision to make it something happen. So yeah, that was my inspiration. Seeing my dad cruise 20-hour days and working at night, take a nap, and get at it again. So I was
Yeah.
very grateful and blessed to have seen and been experienced around a big, solid work ethic, which I think is very Southern. A lot of folks in the South are very much that way. So I'm no different.
Absolutely. So what did it take? Like what are the key lessons from those early years that you're still applying today while you're leading a large team?
Yeah. So what it really takes is, again, that vision. You have to know where you're going, and also it helps having gone there before. With another group, or being exposed to it. If you just kind of come from a service industry and you show up into dental thinking, okay, I can lead a company. Yeah, you'd be in for a rude awakening, put it that way. So it helps having seen, my dad do things, and he rose and fell. Something worked, it didn't work. We had to close down offices, deals didn't go through. It was never a bed of roses. So knowing that you can adapt and evolve and become something regardless of what happens, as long as you're persistent, that I found is what it takes to be successful. Never giving up. And yeah, and then that's definitely something I've carried into my personal life of working in a big group like this, and scaling it and growing it to become one of the biggest solo practices in this region here. I'm in Washington State, so yeah, it's definitely an undertaking.
So where did your ownership start? Like what were some of the first practices you opened and ran and for how long? And what made you kind of decide to start your own practices?
Yeah, so my dad had his groups. He had around 28 practices that he put together. And out of those practices, he had everything from general dentistry to surgery. All of them had laboratories on site. So, working with him and seeing how he did things was very inspirational. He ended up exiting out of dentistry and phasing into the oil and gas industry, which was a fitting, segue. He's being from Texas. We do a lot of ranching and oil and gas out that way. So, yeah, once he did that, and I was in the denturist schooling here in Washington State. I did some schooling in Canada, and I did some additional schooling in Washington State to help my dad out. And once he exited, I was thinking like, well, there's no more practices anymore, but I really love dentistry, so why don't I just create one? I helped him create all of his, so let me just start it on my own. And then before I knew it, one became two, became three, became a dozen, became 20. There were just one after another after another. And, yeah, it just started to scale and grow. And so, yeah, it became a bigger organism. I ended up exiting out of that one group, which had the whole gamut of central location dental laboratories. It had general dentists. As a denturist, I can engage in agreements and cooperations with other general dentists in the state. So that worked out really well. And then, yeah, I ended up exiting out of that one before the pandemic hit. And I had a second one, was a little more low key. I learned a lot out of that first one when you scale that fast. And there was no capital as a denturist. I don't really have access to capital. So a lot of it, I had to be very frugal and resourceful and make things happen. And so, yeah, learning that one, I scaled a little differently on the second one. And just before the pandemic hit, I was when I exited out of that one. And yeah, I want to say I dodged one with that one, not having to deal with that during the pandemic, but I ended up coaching dental practices across the country. And that background of what I had to do to be resourceful to get to where I needed to go in hiring and working with people and setting up groups helped me help other people across the country. So, that it was definitely an experience that I am very grateful for.
And so what parts of, that substantial ownership and then coaching consulting, what parts of those made you want to step into leadership at Mukilteo Dental Center after all those years?
Yeah, so for me, being generational, I've got three daughters, and I went through a lot when I was in those practices. Working, burning the midnight oil, covering for people, making prosthetics at night, and then when I started having children, it was tough. Trying to balance between the two. Trying to find good childcare wasn't always a possibility. So I took care of my kids, and I always told my wife, like, well, I'm out of those groups. I'm generational, but I miss being in the practice. I love coaching, talking to doctors. I love working with people, but I want something for myself that I can do for them to have another opportunity. So I told my wife, we were in West Texas at the time, and I said, if I found an opportunity, I would consider it. She's like, I'm with you. Let's figure it out. Something comes up. Let's discuss it. And before long, I was back home in Texas from Washington State. I was here for quite a while. Went back to Texas, and all of a sudden, I got this phone call. And I was talking with another big group practice management company across the country, and they're like, "Hey, I have an opportunity for you if you're interested." And I said, "Okay, cool. Where is it?" And they're like, "It's in Washington State." I'm like, oh, seriously? I just left Washington. It couldn't have been anywhere else. And the opportunity came up to where there was, a woman-owned practice at Dr. Pham and Dr. Morris. And I'm thinking, okay, this is amazing for my daughters, to have some amazing mentors that could grow them, can educate them, and can show them their pitfalls clinically, and then I could team up with them and we could help one another create a bigger group out of all the lessons that we've learned. So, yeah, I ended up taking the plunge and I said, all right, let's go. I've been a CEO twice in my last couple groups, and I've been a nationwide coach before. And now I was like, I can be a director and help this team grow and become something more. So that's when we decided to drive 2,000 miles back the other way from Texas all the way to Washington State. And my first practice was in Linwood, Washington, with a good friend of mine. And it's funny, Mukilteo is not but maybe 10 minutes away. And I had no idea this doctor in this practice was here. It's amazing, how something this amazing could be right there in your backyard. You just, usually as providers and practice owners, our heads are down and we're, on the grinder, just getting things done. And once I found out that it was literally right here the whole time, it was just eye opening. So yeah, that's when I decided to, jump in here and help them create something to build a better future for dentistry, in the next generation.
Well, most owners are thinking of expanding locations, but Mukilteo is unique because it's all housed under one roof. How many operatories and staff, like how big are we talking here?
Yeah, Mukilteo is definitely a unique practice. When I heard about what it was over the phone, I almost didn't believe it. It didn't really register until I got here, and that's the biggest problem in Western Washington is its availability of square footage. And then if you have the square footage, can you scale and grow? And if you can do that, great. Do you have enough parking spots outside
Yeah.
to accommodate all these people? So even when I was scaling and growing, they were all very much strip mall dental practices, and I had some parking. Parking wasn't too big of a deal, but that's kind of what I dealt with. But I never could find anything big enough that I could scale into and grow. So it was always multi locations. That's the biggest reason why DSOs are so fanned out. But this location, it's an entire building. It's a 30,000 square foot building.
It's
The
huge.
entire practice is literally above me right now. It encompasses 26 suites. There's 20 active suites right now between both sides, and yeah, it's a behemoth. We're up to almost 70 team members right now in this one office. Not all at the same time, but yeah, it's definitely an opportunity to scale and grow. And since the third floor is where all the dentistry is at, we have tons of square footage below us to scale into, which it's a very unique opportunity.
So what makes this model, I mean, it's so unique, like what makes this model work where, many other owners might have trouble scaling in a single location other than parking? Like what, maybe from an operations perspective, yeah, parking's huge, you get that, but from an operations perspective, like what do you feel like you figured out that works really well and allowing this practice to scale specifically?
Yeah, before I started coaching, I learned a lot about a single location practice with a doctor named Dr. A. Score. He's a gentleman that runs Endomastery, and he's all about one location, not having multiples. I think believe he had multiples at one point, and it was too much. It can be too much because there's so many things that happen. Even the demographic that you serve in each city is different. If what you've done in one city might not work in another, you're going to have to adapt and evolve to accommodate what's going on in there. Now you can have basic systems, but it's not always replicable, in certain areas. So learning from him and understanding that this location isn't a single location, it makes it simple to where you don't have to worry about sending people across, cities. If I'm in Linwood and we're short staffed in Mukilteo or we're short staffed in Seattle, I don't have to worry about saying, okay, Janet and Jane, y'all go over there to Seattle today. I'm overstaffed here. And then now all of a sudden they're looking at me going, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to work over there.
Yeah.
That's a big issue in this office. It's all in one building, so we know what we need to do. People still call out, things still happen. HR has always been a bear in dentistry, because it's a service company. You have to have individuals doing the work to make it happen. So yeah, having it all in one location, centralized, and then being able to compartmentalize processes. Whereas the normal general practice, you have an office manager. Sometimes, a lot of the times, you just have a front desk that checks people in, and you got another front desk that does treatment plans and checks people out. Well, that's pretty much it. The bigger ones, as they start going along, everybody's got to do everything, and no one's really responsible for anything, which makes it tough. And you can't really scale that philosophy into a bigger organization. So, yeah, having access to all the team members in one site, me being able to work with them on a daily basis helps keep it fresh in their mind as to what we're looking for. So the vision stays pinnacle, and scalability is just much more tangible that way.
Sure. And as far as kind of keeping, treatment quality high, how do you kind of balance that with, scalable growth and then innovation, adding, because you have a lab there as well, right? Like how do you kind of balance the consistency between all the team members and then, make sure that is scalable and innovative?
Yeah, the quality of care is always important. What makes it even more amazing is that we've got our providers all on site, right? We've got 5 general dentists here, and there's about 10 hygienists. Their specialty next door with these guys. We've got on the specialty side over there. Yeah, I've got perio, prosto, ortho, oral surgery. So there's this collaboration that you just don't normally find before. And a lot of the times patients have to go travel across the county, to go get what they need if you got to deal with specialty care. But having everything centrally here, the general dentist can do their referral and not have to take on so much. In this office, it's very much bread and butter dentistry. They do crowns, they do fillings, and they do hygiene. That's general dentistry. That's Mukilteo Dental Center in a nutshell, which is what allows them to see so many patients and not make it feel like it's a factory. A lot of the times when you're seeing more than 50 patients a day, you can feel like a number. Patients don't really feel like they're an individual. And in here, we're seeing anywhere from 90 to 110, 120 a day. Yeah, which is a lot, but it's very sustainable because we have systems. We've got processes within the teams. There's a check-in team. There's a PCC team to each doctor. Each doctor has a pod. So when you look at it, it starts going this into a real big cookie, and you start narrowing it down into this very small field to where it's just like an everyday dental practice, only in one location. That's what allows us to control the quality. And then dealing with the laboratory, I'm a lab guy, totally. I'm an analog lab guy, pouring up impressions and whipping up, alginate. We don't do a lot of that stuff in here, unfortunately, for me at least. But yeah, it's very advanced. We've got the entire Sorona suite back there. So we've got the Prime Scan, we've got the Prime Mill. We've got an older MCXL that does the Emax milling. Yeah, everything's completely digital. From dealing with Prime Scan and using the iTero, it allows our team to knock out crowns within the same hour and a half. Advancements have come so far. It's amazing. I used to stain and glaze and stack porcelain with my dad back in the day, and now we're looking at it. We can knock out a crown and mill a crown in probably 8 minutes, if not shorter. And
Yeah.
then we can center a crown now, which we use Katana One's speed block. block, which allows us to center in not 18 or 20 minutes. It knocks it down to 8 minutes, which is even faster.
Yeah, that's insane.
It is, and the quality looks phenomenal, as long as you've got that system. Now, not everybody's, able to do these things. Some people just aren't as inclined. So it's being a good leader is identifying people's strengths and weaknesses and applying that to where they are able to thrive. So we've got DAs that are really solid at that, and we've got one to each doctor when they're here on those days, so that way they can get those same day crowns out consistently and beautifully, rather. We don't want to be putting out things that don't look good. And then, the other DAs are much stronger at handling the flow. So that's what allows our company to stay sustainable and make it an attraction, for where people want to come and just say, yes, I'm not at work. This is my home.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you have to have like core principles across the systems and all the staff you have. I mean, what are some of the core principles that you're using kind of universally across the whole practice?
Yeah, the big one is the pod philosophy. So again, when you have a big practice like this and you've got all these columns on an EMR, it can be very overwhelming, especially for a lead. I've got a front office lead that handles that day-to-day stuff. But yeah, to make it not become overwhelming, you work in a pod philosophy. So the pod basically is your one doctor, you got your two DAs, basically, one hygienist, and you got a PCC. All that equates to a practice. And if I've got three of those working on each day, now you got a sustainable working model. And if those DAs are working in tandem with the doctor, the GP basically, to send over the referrals as consistently as needed, now you can start condensing schedules. Now you can start being more effective in the amount of patients that you're seeing. And it makes it now where it's not one of those things like, well, there's just so much to do. Like a DA has always got the highest turnover from what I've seen. And the reason for that is a lot of general practices are trying to do everything under the sun, which is fine. That works for some people. For us here, if we try to set up for a root canal, then a surgery, then an implant, and then a crown, and then a couple fillings, the amount of instruments and tools and it slows you down dramatically. So by us just condensing the crowns and fillings philosophy into the general dentistry model, it just makes it so much more enjoyable and sustainable, which has always been my goal.
Yeah. Well, and I think burnout's a common theme in dentistry. Do you feel like the pod system's supporting that or?
Yes, 100%, because it's not just one doctor with one DA running 3 to 4 ops. And I've seen that happen a lot with hopefully a sterile tech in the back that is just trying to keep up with dishes, is what I call it. When I was doing sterilization, I call it doing the dishes. So yeah, when you're back there trying to keep up with all the sterilization, it's almost impossible. And then if you get people that are calling out, now you've got one doctor with one DA. Now who's doing sterile? Well, we need to order up and get more inventory, which is great. It costs more money to the practice, but now who's sterilizing? And then if you're trying to get that many dishes, essentially, through the M11s or the M9s, then you're going to overheat those things, and they're just not going to be able to sterilize as effectively. We've actually run into that
Yeah.
because of the amount of volume from time to time. So it takes a sustainable team backing each other up, working in tandem each day, focusing on your doctor and focusing on your patients. And that compartmentalization allows you to scale in a single location specifically much, much faster and much more sustainably.
Yeah. And I guess, you're juggling a lot, obviously, running the operation, but does that mean that you have, future leaders that you're mentoring in the practice so that growth doesn't just depend on you?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the goal for me is to be the least important person in the company. I learned that from my first one. The first one I had an ego. I'm from West Texas. I'm my dad's son. I was like, yeah, I'm the top of the chain. Everybody listen to me. I learned from that point on, when you do that, you're completely responsible for everything. You never shut off. And that was what it was. That's kind of what led to me burning out. I'm very happy and transparent in telling the world that, I got to a point where I rose to the top and I ended up frying myself, working 20-hour days, sleeping in the ops, taking a nap, getting up, doing it again, working out in the gym, coming back and seeing patients in the morning. That was a lot. But in here, it's being the least important person. So what that means is I help each individual. I try to take what I know and empower them and get them to be able to be the speaker. Their voice is so much more important than mine is there to help lead them. But if you do something like that, you're actually enabling people to feel like they're heard, and you're allowing them to lead and not be micromanaged. Micromanagement is something nobody wants to deal with. But yeah, if you're allowing them to have that voice, their power is what's heard, and then those teams are able to follow them, and then you can build on that, which has always been the goal.
What were some of the signs or red flags that, I guess that other practice owners can notice before the burnout hits? Is there anything that you'd say, hey, look, if this happens, you got to make some changes?
Yeah, well, some people want to scale, and that's one thing I didn't realize until, until I was too big. When things start scaling and things start happening, you're not really thinking about what burnout is going to be. You feel bulletproof, but the wall is there. It's invisible, and it'll hit you when it hits you. One red flag is if you're, for me, I was a lab guy, so I worked a lot at night. You don't want to be grinding on dentures and making crowns all day long because you do more valuable things, which is seeing patients and working with team members. But for me, I was smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee and just drinking anything I could to keep myself mentally focused. No explode creatines. I'm like, yeah, I'm doing great. I
Yeah.
did that for a decade, and that's when the burnout hit me. I didn't realize that just because I could do it meant that I should. Knowing that it took me filling in so many people's roles when it happened. I thought I was saving money by not paying certain people, certain C-suite type people that I should have developed. I didn't develop the C-suite, or the director level or any of that in my own group until it was literally too late. I was already fried out, and I'm like, I can't find anybody to help me, and I don't really have much mentally left. So that's when I ended up exiting. So I always suggest people to never really exit. Partner with somebody. DSOs aren't bad. They're great groups. They're great vehicle. Create your own DSO if that's something you want to do. If you haven't found something out there that works for you, create your own. There's nothing that says you can't. A DSO essentially is just a management vehicle that allows you to scale and grow and even share equity with unlicensed individuals. And that's what another thing was for me to motivate team members is, you know what, you can profit with me because it's part of my management company. And before I knew it, people were fighting just as hard as I was, and we were all having a blast at the same time. So you want to make sure you're having fun. If you're not having fun and you really feel like this is work, then that's when you need to really throw in the towel, get some coaching, work with some groups, or again, create your own organism and be in charge of what that vision is.
Yeah, I mean, this is a hot topic, so I just want to dig in a little bit more. I mean, in your experience, you've gone through burnout and you're obviously kind of overcome it. So how do you kind of create a balance and build fulfillment, or how did you do it in your career?
Yeah, it's being aware of what's going on. If you're really focused on your destination, you tend to forget that you exist. And this is an issue with high performing people. You're go, go, go all the time, and you forget to one, take care of yourself. That's another big one. Like for me, I would just go, go, go. I wouldn't even think. My wife would be yelling at me, did you eat? Like I forgot. I don't have time. I'll drink some coffee because it was my destination where I was going was my goal. I was just so excited. So yeah, making sure you're taking care of yourself is critical, but being aware of what's going on around you. It's not just about you. If you want to be successful, it's a matter of taking other people with you. You can't be the one man army. It's not me, myself, and I don't need anybody. Yeah, a DSO is a service company, and you also first have to serve each other. So being a servant leader is what literally swapped me around from being the opposite direction. I turned the tide for myself and became that servant leader. I'm going to take care of others, and I'm going to take care of myself at the same time. It allowed me to actually scale and grow better, more effectively, and gave me the time to take care of my kids. My girls were always with me. I was in the practices with my dad, but yeah, having hit that burnout and learned that you can push as much as you want to. You're kind of fighting an uphill battle until you just start learning to serve each other, take care of what you need to do, and take bite-sized steps each time. You'll gain more ground than you'll lose.
And now that you have gained ground, right? You're in a comfortable position and leadership's working and Mokateo is scaling. What are you most excited about with kind of the direction that Mokateo is going, and then maybe just like generally the direction that dentistry is heading with technology and patient experience?
Yeah, so what really makes me excited the most is seeing the camaraderie and the teamwork. Having a ton of people here. You've got all different walks of life, all the different generational gaps from the greatest generation all the way up to Gen Alphas and Gen X's. And you get so many different perspectives. But what makes me wake up every morning and makes me excited is seeing that teamwork, right? Seeing that stress that I used to experience back in the day with the smaller practice with one or two people, thinking I was saving money by not hiring so many more people to handle the situation. Seeing everybody work together, that is exciting. Seeing them help one another, seeing the patient smiles, seeing how this model has turned into something I never would have thought it would have existed. So that to me is exciting. And then knowing that you can take something like this and scale it into different regions is also part of our philosophy. If we can take something like this, scale our specialists into the building, get these specialists down here that we're working with, and create a big organization where you've got a 30,000 square foot facility and you can duplicate that into different major metropolitan locations. That to me is what makes me even more excited, because these are things that I feel should exist. A patient, and understanding what they're going through, having to go all over the place, that's kind of an older model that worked before, but it's not as current as it could be. So yeah, that's another part of where we're headed, what we're working to accomplish, and taking more people with us.
Yeah, is there still more room to scale in the current location? Or are you thinking about adding more operatories or staff, or what does growth look like from here in that location specifically?
Yeah, no, we've got a boatload of space here. So right now the practice above is encompassing around 11,000 square feet, 10,800, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yeah,
And to get the specialists, that are next door, working with those guys and getting them to scale into their own practices. We've got room in this building for another 30 operatories, in certain segments, another 3,000 square foot tranches, and then scaling those into bigger specialty groups, even having a bigger on-site lab where we can do our own milling for the prost. So that way we don't have to send things out as much, is basically where we want to hit with that. So yeah, we definitely got room to grow. We'll need more team members. We'll need more talent, and more leadership. That's always the.
yeah. Well, and as a leader, I always ask this question, but what piece of advice would you give out, to a young doctor just coming out of school or starting a practice? What would be the one thing that you want to hit home?
So the first thing I would say is work with good mentors, right? Um, Seek out advice and guidance. There are consultants, there are coaches, there are groups that are out there that can help you overcome obstacles, that will save you a boatload of time and a boatload of anguish, to
Yeah,
put it lightly. Never having asked questions when I was younger was one of my big things. I just learned from other people and I just thought I could do it.
yeah,
Sometimes you can make that happen. Sometimes you can sneak by without, getting going through all the rigorous trials and tribulations of what happens of doing things without knowing. But it makes no sense these days, especially with a bunch of amazing human beings that are out there that have the experience, that have the guidance. They've done it before. They can coach you and guide you through it. If you start that day one and you create that vision and that pathway, I can guarantee your life will be a complete different story. You'll be so much more happy. You'll be so much more successful. And you'll understand how successful and rewarding dentistry actually is.
yeah. I mean, and I think that applies to a lot of industries or positions where people are entrepreneurs, right?
Right? Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Matthew, this has been incredible. I mean, I think your story really highlights how leadership and structure systems and culture can transform a dental organization even in one location. So how can people connect with you further, or where can they find your services or Mukilteo Dental?
Yeah, Mukilteo Dental, you can always find them on the web. So www.mukilteodentalcenter.com. If you're looking for me, I love being a mentor to anybody from dental laboratories to dental practices to denturists, the gamut. I'm always a resource for anybody. You can always find me also on LinkedIn. If you go on LinkedIn and look up Matthew Hernandez, I have a group that's Seraph Dental Management. It's one of my older companies that I've had for quite a while. So yeah, you can look me up there and shoot me an email, or my phone number is on there as well. Feel free to send me a text message. It's always the fastest. And I'd love to chat with you.
Amazing. Well, thanks for spending the time on the podcast. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks so much, Nick. I appreciate it.